Hi there. Great to have you with us and joining us if you're watching live and also listening back to the podcast. It is great to have you with us, and I hope you're all keeping safe. Um, really exciting as for once doing a mini series where we're going through a series of concerts with the London Mozart players, how they're coping with going online during lockdown and their journey and what it means to now be playing together. So this week, I'm again joined by one of the players of the London Mozart players, and also their soloist from one of their recent concerts as well. So first of all, I just want to ask you both to say hello and introduce yourself. So Olivier, thank you so much for joining us. I'll go to you first. Um, what I like to do is put people on the spot. So how would you define yourself as a musician? What it is that you do in the world, and who are you?
Oh, I think I'd better answer very simply. I play the oboe, and mostly in the London Symphony Orchestra, but also on my own in various settings. And here we are, I think.
Fantastic. And Gareth, for yourself, who would you describe yourself as in the world?
Yeah, I also play the oboe. I've been playing for rather a bit longer than Olivier, so I've a lot of different groups and organisations, but basically I'm just an oboist, yeah.
Fantastic. And I imagine you all have rather eclectic careers, because I know that Olivier, you're not just an oboist as a soloist with the London Mozart players, but you're also with the London Symphony Orchestra. And Gareth, I know that you're also with various ensembles as well. So I imagine it must be quite hard during this period when you're so used to playing with so many different people. What was it like when things changed at the very beginning of this and all of a sudden that you were then taken away from all the other musicians? Gareth, do you want to start with that one?
Well, at first, it was actually quite nice. The weather was good. I was out in the sun a lot. We have an allotment. I was doing a lot of digging and gardening, and we're now seeing lots of lovely fresh vegetables, which is great. And then after a couple of months, I started to get sort of cabin fever, really, and wishing I was playing again, and really got a little bit depressed by just not playing with people. And singing in your own front room doesn't really cut it for me. I practice just because I have to get things right, but it's not fun. It's not, as you know, for me, music is collaborating with other people. And even when concerts started to come back, well, first of all, I was recording things online. One of my jobs is the BBC Concert Orchestra, and we were doing a lot of things called house music, which is a lot of it was for Radio 2, so lightish music, and we'd each record our own part at home, and it would all get mixed together. And that's just a very mechanical process, really, not much fun. At least it kept me playing, and then when concerts came back, we did a concert in the Albert at the end of August, and that was great. Except there's no audience, so it felt weird. It was just a bit like a studio broadcast, really. And we were sitting so far apart, it was very difficult to get a sense of balance and ensemble and all that. And as I've done more concerts like that, you get used to it, but it's still not as good as.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine it being very tricky. And for you, Olivia, was it a similar experience of being taken away from musicians to all of a sudden then have it as quite a difficult challenge going forward?
I think it was an experience very similar to Gareth's, actually. At the beginning, it was quite nice. I must say that in the last 5 years, until March, the tempo had been quite relentless with a lot of touring, a lot of teaching, a lot of commitments and a lot of traveling. And it felt very nice at first to simply be in one place and not be all over the place. And I think this was my longest stretch without taking a plane since I was 17. Maybe for the last 13 years, I think that even when I was a student, I would travel to go and see my parents every 3 months or so, maybe, and so this was nice in the beginning, and I think we all got cabin fever as well. For me, I could add that the experience was a lot about online teaching. Gareth and I both teach at the Royal College of Music, so we are colleagues. there, and I tried to see what I could do online, and some can be frustrating because of the communications, but also paradoxically, we started to exchange recordings with the students, and the fact that I could be simply present for the students every week and follow up, because that's basically almost all I had to do, meant that some of them actually made a very nice progress during the lockdown, and it was very heartwarming to see. So that was one thing, and also discovering new hobby. Discovering that I had a garden, because before that there was more of an impenetrable jungle as soon as you opened the door. We discovered that actually humans could be there, and it was nice too. But yeah, it's been great starting to play again. I also had the opportunity to record a CD at the end of August, recorded Mozart sonatas for piano and violin, transcribed for oboe and piano, in Edinburgh with Jonathan Ware, and that was great. I thought again it would have been hard to schedule it normally, but it gave us time. I think as much as the distancing is problematic when we play, because it makes playing mechanical. I completely agree with Gareth. I would say that I appreciate the fact that the rhythm has been a little bit more human, with basically having days off in a week, and being able to balance music and life is quite nice, I would say.
Certainly, I think it's one of the strange things that sort of has come out of this is sort of people realizing what their pace of life was at certain times, in particular with touring orchestras. It can be incredibly relentless at times, and sort of the initial glamour of international travel wears very thin after the first 2 or 3 flights, and especially when one of them's been delayed. So all of a sudden actually having time to go out and do things and discover your garden, I think is, yeah, potentially an unexpected benefit. But as you were saying, Gareth, sort of the cabin fever does kick in at some point, which is certainly tricky. So I'm really interested to sort of to dive into your recent collaboration, particularly as you're both oboes. I think it could be really fascinating. But you've been performing together as part of the London Mozart Players Classical Club concert season. What was that recent collaboration, and what was the incredible oboe solo that was a part of this? So Gareth, do you want to tell me a little bit more about the series?
We didn't actually play together.
Oh, really? We're not in the same...
There was a soloist in the Strauss oboe concerto, and the orchestration for that just has a cor anglais, no oboe. So the lady who plays the cor anglais in the orchestra was playing in that piece, and I was able to listen, which was great. And I must say, Olivier, it was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. It was a fantastic performance, really inspiring. So I was just playing in the symphony, which was the Mendelssohn Italian Symphony, which is always fun to play. It's really light, uplifting music.
Definitely. And
the series was all about young concert artists. There's the Young Concert Artists Trust. I think Julia's told you all about this before. Exists to provide a platform for young soloists, and because of the lockdown, they haven't been able to provide that platform properly. So Julia had this idea of collaborating with them and presenting some concerts which were to admittedly very small audiences, but then they're streamed, so there can be a very large audience potentially.
Certainly, and I think it's really interesting to look at the repertoire that's been chosen. So my oboe knowledge is incredibly limited, but one thing I do know is just how hard the Strauss is. Was it quite a challenge to sort of to have that as one of your first things out of lockdown, to come and play the Strauss oboe concerto with all its challenges?
Well, no, I'd say it was just lovely. It was nice. I haven't played the Strauss much over the years. Actually, I've played the Mozart oboe concerto much more often, and playing with the London Mozart Players was a huge pleasure. I really loved the band, the musicianship, and the people. And I would say I had been playing for a while as we started again. As we recorded the Strauss in early October, I had been playing for quite a while, so it didn't feel like as it was straight out of lockdown. I did play a straight out of lockdown concert with a very difficult chamber program, which was chosen by my colleague in the LSO, and that was quite something in the sense that to feel that to go from nothing to full on. But I would say it was just a lovely experience. And also, I haven't been playing in a proper concert hall. Actually, I mean, we play in St. Luke's, in LSO St. Luke's, which is a smaller hall. But the Fairfields Hall is I would say, a more normally sized concert hall. And to play in that setting was the first time since lockdown, actually.
Fantastic. And it's, yeah, much must be. What did it feel like for both of you now being able to come back in and start playing with each other and your colleagues and your contemporaries after this period of it'll be, I guess, 5 or 6 months for you since you will have played together? What did that feel like for you both?
It's brilliant. It's really nice. I mean, socially, to see friends and colleagues is marvellous. And just to do what you've been doing all your life, what you trained to do and what comes naturally, it's if you're a musician and you can't play, it's a bit like having a limb cut off. You can get through life, but it doesn't feel quite right. Do you know what I mean? And so it's been marvellous. Yeah. Simple.
Fantastic. Was there sort of any unexpected things that you missed throughout this period musically?
Just playing. Simple. Yeah.
Incredible.
It's fine, but it's not the same as playing.
Very true. So one thing I'm really intrigued about to sort of talk to you both about is the issues about being a woodwind player during these times and the rules and regulations that you've now got to cope with. So you already mentioned about the difficulty in playing at distance and being socially distanced from your partners and colleagues, particularly when in the woodwind you're behind the orchestra anyway, you're now pushed further back. Just how much of a challenge is that for you both in your roles? Olivier, how have you found that in the chamber music you've been performing?
Well, in a chamber music concert, it was sort of okay because you're not that many, and even if you're a bit further apart than usual, the total distance in between. I think what makes it difficult to play is how far apart can two instruments be, and if you're only 4 on stage, it's fine. But if you're playing in a full orchestra and set, and the principal double bass, who is incredibly important, is, I don't know, something like 20 meters away from you, then that's really, really tricky. And I must say that the distancing makes, especially from playing in the orchestra, takes out a lot of the musical interaction, I would say. So that's not great. You have to always anticipate when you play earlier than in time than what you would normally be doing, which feels a bit like you're it's like you're dragging the blanket to you all the time, because when you play early, it's normally musically it's quite a strong signal, so you feel like some form of activist there, always pushing things. And you're doing this with the knowledge that people at the other end of the room will still find you being too late compared to what they are playing, and they will be doing exactly the same. So, no, it is tricky. And also, I think it's also a little bit frustrating to see regulations put in place for woodwind instrument on a basis that seems pretty arbitrary, actually, because there have been many studies that show that the situation is different depending on which instrument you're talking about. Flutes is not the same as the oboe. The opening of the reed on an oboe is, I would say, barely 2 square millimeters. And then you have a tube of 60 centimeters that follows. And what you hear is sound. What you hear is not air coming through the instrument. There's virtually no air coming through the instrument when you play. Most of the air you take in, you're going to blow out outside the instrument before you take the next breath. So to be forced to be so far apart from other instruments on that basis can be a bit frustrating, yes. Sorry, that was a lengthy answer.
No, it's a great answer, though. And I've seen on quite a few different live streams sort of wind and brass players with them buckets underneath them for various things as well. What other things do you have to do? Are you both affected by having to have some sort of bucket for moisture of things in your instruments?
Not buckets, no. There's very little moisture comes out of the organism. at the BBC, they're generally stricter with regulation than other orchestras because they have to be seen to be squeaky clean. And the distancing there is 3 meters per player, which makes it even harder. And after each rehearsal, we're instructed to wipe the floor around our seat to mop up anything.
That's I think it's uncharted territory that we're now sort of have moved into. So both of you have transitioned to being online, not just in the ensembles you play in and doing digital output as part of that, but from teaching online and various bits as well. What sort of skills have you developed during this time that you didn't have before, or that you didn't know that you needed to have? Gareth, sort of how has it been for you transitioning to teaching online, and what have you picked up during this period?
Well, I'm a bit of a technophobe, actually. I didn't grow up with computers. They came to me when I was already set in my ways. So I find it a bit of a struggle sometimes, and I tend to panic when things don't go properly right, But I've got used to it, and I can teach confidently online. The other week I taught a couple of people, one in Australia and one in New Zealand, and it was just the same as if I'd been teaching somebody online who's at the college. So that's fine. It's frustrating because you can't hear properly, and if you both talk at once, neither of you hear the other person, and you can't see what they're doing so clearly because it's a small screen, and even now this term we're back teaching in college, which is marvelous, but still we don't look at each other's reads. Really, that's a little bit taboo at the moment. So it's frustrating, but it's better than nothing. And as Olivier said, the best part for the students about the online teaching is just the fact of being able to play to somebody once a week, and it makes them work, and it makes them feel that they're doing something and they're progressing.
Very much so. And Olivier, for yourself, what have you managed to pick up digitally during this time, and how have you? What skills have you accrued during this time?
Well, baking bread and looking after a garden. What else? Doing some woodwork, painting shelves.
Digitally, what have you picked up? What sort of tech-wise?
Digitally, well, I'll tell you a little bit. I mean, I wish I had the pleasure to live 30 years or 20 years of my life before computers. I think I don't know what it's like, and I wish I had known it. I think we would have all been more present in the moment and actually engaged in the people who are in the situations around us, and not constantly looking elsewhere and being. But on the other hand, I must say that yes, it's a great opportunity to be able to teach someone who is very far away and who normally would not have requested an online lesson. They really, it wasn't really very developed before this lockdown. So yes, I have been giving classes to Brazilian students. I have been teaching some American pupils, and technically speaking, I've been working quite a lot on trying to improve the audio quality of online lessons. It's possible. It still doesn't solve all the problems, but there are ways of making it work a bit better. I think the most difficult part remains the read. I still haven't found a solution to help the students with his or her read at the moment. Even physically in a classroom, being 2 meters apart, I still don't know how to solve this problem, but we'll get there. And I would say, yes, there was something else, but it will come back later.
No, I think that's an incredible challenge, and in particular, even before sort of working out tactically sort of what's wrong with the read, just the visual side that you can't see it at that distance in any sort of elements. It must be a real frustration when you're sort of desperate to just lean in and grab and start assisting in things on the technical side. I think it's really fascinating seeing what you've both done together, both in terms of these digital performances. What do you both think the future for digital concert is, and how do you see it developing over time? And Gareth, have you any thoughts as to sort of how the series has gone so far and what it could potentially be in the future?
Yes, I think it's going well. I think it's a growth industry, definitely. It won't replace concerts because there'll always be opportunities to play. Well, while this virus is around, there'll always be opportunities to play to small audiences. But until we can get back to proper full-size, full halls, it won't be economic really to do that. And people want to listen to concerts, and they're willing to pay to look at them and hear them. That's great, and it will develop, and we'll get better at filming them, and we'll get better at sorting out venues. I mean, one of the ones I did with the Mozart plays recently, which is it's not come out yet. It's two of the Roald Dahl stories, Little Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Pigs, so it's called Piano and Wind Quintet. And they chose a lovely venue, which is the conservatory at Syon House, which is basically a big 19th century greenhouse. And it will look beautiful on the film, I'm sure. But it was a hot day, and they had all the doors and windows open to let some air in. And so we had the music blowing off the stands. And in the morning, the sun was beating down through the roof onto my face. So it was dazzling. And in the afternoon, the sun had moved round and it was beating down into the face of the clarinet player. And these are problems. And, you know, it didn't stop the project, but it made it difficult. But the end product will be fine, I'm sure. And as you learn from each go at this thing, things get better.
Certainly. And Olivier, for yourself, how do you see the sort of future of this platform developing? What do you think digital concerts could be in the future, if you think it is a future?
Well, I think that, as Gareth says, I think that there is a lot of potential development for digital concerts. On the other hand, it's also something that already existed, and it's been around for a while. There are dedicated TV stations for this. Maybe things that we haven't really seen before the pandemic, and that can emerge from this, could be more educational materials in video, sort of master classes, online events dedicated to teaching. I think that's probably something that is going to grow a lot. But also, I think local concerts, simply put, things that will require simpler logistics than what we used to do in terms of international touring, conductors and soloists coming from the other end of the world, even musicians traveling constantly. I would say small venues, local concerts, fewer musicians, fewer people in the audience, but maybe a greater sense of connectedness. The LSO actually ran a concert, a pilot series called LSO Local for two weeks ago, which I think was a success, and I think that we'll be seeing more of these kinds of initiatives. I think the New York Phil had a music truck. I heard. I haven't seen the video myself, but I think they were driving around in a truck and playing. If I understand well.
Amazing. Yeah, I think there's, as you said, there's so much potential going forward as to what this could be. One thing I'm fascinated by is, so for example, I've heard a lot of complaints as to what these digital concerts look like. So it is an orchestra playing to an empty hall or to a small hall. And I'm really fascinated to sort of see what this could be in future and if we completely reimagine what an orchestra performance looks like. And on one of these podcasts, I spoke to Scottish Opera about their digital opera, The Narcissistic Fish, where it wasn't an opera on a stage, but they filmed it as if it was a feature film with different camera angles and immersive sets, and sort of it looked like a movie, but was an opera. Do you think there's potentially a sort of a second medium that could come off this, where it's a digital visual performance of an orchestra that isn't in a sort of a way where it's sort of outward facing to an imaginary audience, and it's more potentially, I don't know, circular, like I know Ivan Fisher has done some weird experiments with an orchestra in the rounds. Do you think there's scope for potentially reimagining what that could be?
Definitely. Yeah, why not? I mean, you sit in the festival hall and you can barely see the faces of the players. Whereas if you've got cameras all over the place and you have different takes so that you can stop the music and move the cameras and all that, you can create something extraordinary that's really filmic, and that's a new experience. Why not? I'm sure Beethoven would have been up for that if it was around.
Certainly. Yeah, I think it could be a really interesting avenue.
Berlioz would have been up for it.
I think he's pretty much up for anything most of the time. But yeah, I think it's great to see how things are changing. And one thing I'm really interested to talk to you both about is your teaching capacity, is how things are changing for students. So Olivier, I know that you have your solo career with YCAT, and they support you in your role as a soloist, which is Young Classical Artists Trust, but also then is your orchestral role with the London Symphony Orchestra. Do you think it's important to have these sort of portfolio careers where you're doing both orchestral and solo work at the same time?
I would say most woodwind soloists have had, at least for a part of their career, an orchestral base, I would say. I think our instruments are a little bit not born out of the orchestra, that wouldn't be correct historically, but at least shaped by the orchestra and by the orchestral repertoire. And the orchestral repertoire also has some fantastic pages for us. Plus, playing in an orchestra is also great fun. So I would say that, to me, it's a question of finding the right balance. I would say I appreciate to have a bit of diversity in what I'm doing, and yes.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you see that your students are now going to have to do different things going forwards as well?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think it's still too early to say. I think I really very much hope that it is transitory and that things will come back to normal, that the job market will come back to normal for the students once they leave college. I would say it's probably still too early to say, but I really hope that venues and orchestras and the general level of activity will recover as soon as possible, really.
Certainly. And what skills do you both think that students are going to need now going into this new career sort of job prospect going forwards? What will they need to do differently that they didn't need to do before this pandemic? How do you think careers going? Gareth, do you have any thoughts as to what students might need?
I think they just have to be very open-minded and flexible and acquire as many different skills as they can, actually, because everybody going to college to learn the oboe wants to play the oboe, but they might not be able to do that for a living. Well, probably won't, actually, a lot of them. So they've got to be able to find ways of using their playing skills to enhance what they do. And that might be teaching, it might be working with other people, because playing the instrument teaches you, actually. You can bring that. I'll tell you a funny story. There's a colleague of mine who's a freelancer. Has been on the phone down now, and she's finding she's going to be very short of money because there's no work there. And she rang up the Department of Security to ask about going on universal credit. And she told her story and what life was like to the lady, who was very sympathetic, and said, well, actually, I should refuse you for universal credit, but your case sounds so interesting, I'm going to refer you upstairs. So a little later, somebody else rang her back, and they had a very long chat about all sorts of things, and she described what her life was like, and she ended up saying, so what should I do? Should I go and stack shelves in Sainsbury's? And he said, well, I think actually you'd be very good in the civil service. So he clocked that she'd got a lot of skills, social skills. She was describing things very clearly. She knew what the system was. I think people just need to be very, very open-minded and not to think of themselves as a failure if they don't end up playing full-time. That's really important. I mean, how many people who study art subjects at universities end up doing their subject? Very few, actually.
Very much so. I originally did a history degree, or started doing a history degree before changing. So I think it's amazing to see where people end up and what they do.
Exactly. But I'm sure that doing your history degree would have given you skills that are contributing now, probably.
Yeah, very much so. I only did 1 year, then switched to playing the cello, which is a bit of a change. But it was certainly really fascinating to sort of get that something different before starting my journey. So before we finish, I thought it'd be really interesting to sort of go back to the performance that you both did together. What has it felt like being able to perform and connect people around the world through these digital concerts? And how important has it been to you to get back to performing like this?
You're not conscious of around the world. You're just conscious of the concert. I mean, there were only about 60 people in the Fairfield Hall, and the Fairfield Hall, for people who don't know, is like a small version of the Royal Festival Hall. In fact, actually, I think it's a better hall for sound. It's really good hall. So there were some people in the audience, and they clapped like Dillier at the end, which is great. But you're not conscious of being filmed and it going. It's just what happens. So it just felt like a concert.
Fantastic. And Olivia, for you, how did it feel to be back performing again? And no, it wasn't your first, but what was it like to be able to do this sort of things?
Well, I mean, as I said, it felt great, and it would have felt, I think, just as great in every. So in any other moment, just because I really enjoyed playing with the lots and Mozart players so much, and also I love the piece so much. But it's interesting. Again, this is not something that's entirely new to have concerts that are broadcast and which get an audience that we sometimes wouldn't suspect, and it's. Somehow these figures are sometimes very hard to believe when you think that your concert have been viewed maybe, I don't know, 20,000 times or what does that mean? It's hard to represent, but at the same time it's also heartwarming. I would say to see that you can reach such a larger audience. I think it's absolutely vital that we continue playing for many reasons, for the industry, for us, for the public, for the simply because I think you really value cultural life when you experience it. When you don't experience it, you go and do something else, and you go and scroll whatever news website you're addicted to, or anything. But it's when you do these things that you realize how valuable they are. It's when you go to the museum, it's when you go to the theater, when you go to the concert that you really realize what big a role it plays in your life, or at least maybe I should say, just speak for myself. But that's how I function. I'd be very happy being in the countryside for 2 months without going to a concert. But the day I go back to a concert, I would feel that, I have been missing this so hard, and so yeah, that's how I feel about this coming times.
Fantastic. I think it's a wonderful note to end on. So if you're either watching or you're listening back and want to go and see this incredible performance, which now I'm going to be doing on tomorrow on my day off, you can go to the London Mozart Players website, and if you just type that into Google, it will come up. And you'll be able to access their classical concert club there, and as well as all their other performances as well. So Gareth and Olivia, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Welcome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And, pleasure. And I hope you all manage to join us next time for the next podcast. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you very much. Good.